Hello, everyone, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, a baseball fan, a baseball coach. I've been coaching for about 10 years now at the high school level, season ticket holder, huge fan of the game, love talking about the game, everything about baseball. And today I am joined by Asher Cohn, another podcast host. He's the co-host of the Steel podcast, which focuses on sabermetrics and discusses all kinds of sabermetrics in baseball. And it's interesting because, Asher, you're here talking about the Yankees, although your co-host is a Red Sox fan. How is it hosting a podcast with a rival fan?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And it's always interesting. I can say that we are constantly arguing. What's interesting is usually our debates, we tone it down on the podcast. It's off the podcast that it really gets heated. But it's a lot of fun. We agree on a lot of aspects of baseball. We just happen to hate each other's teams.
Well, today there's no hate on the podcast today. It's all about celebrating the Yankees as we discuss the Yankees today. So I'm looking forward for your input on everything about the Yankees. And, we're broadcasting here from Monument Park at the new Yankee Stadium. A lot of history with the Yankees. We'll go over, we'll skim through it quickly here, because if we went in depth, that's like 3 podcast episodes, because there's a lot of success, a lot of history with the Yankees, isn't there, Asher?
Yeah, it's, in my mind, the greatest history of any franchise. Obviously some of the most successful seasons, but not as much success in the past few years. Hopefully we can turn that around. But yeah, it's a great, rich history and a lot of great teams.
Yeah, and when we go back into the beginning of that history, the Baltimore Orioles, which is unrelated to the current Baltimore Orioles, were founded in 1901 when the American League was founded. And some people associate that team with the current Yankees team. But I think, when you really look at it, there's not an association there, because that Orioles team was there. And because I think they wanted to be in New York, but the New York Giants at the time blocked another team from being in New York. So they were formed in Baltimore. Then they ended up folding after a couple of years, and it created an opening in the league. I guess that franchise was sold to the league. Then there was a new franchise awarded to New York, and that's when the current version of the Yankees was formed in 1903. They were the Highlanders. Then they became the Yankees in 1913. It's funny when, this is the 30th episode I've done on 30th team, the final franchise that I'm discussing. It's funny looking at these teams and seeing how many different names, they all went through. Nowadays, there's all kinds of market research and stuff like that to determine the team names. But back then it was a little looser. So they've been, the Yankees since 1913. They've played in Yankee Stadium, the old original Yankee Stadium, from 1923, the house that Ruth built, until 2008. They had a brief couple of years in Shea Stadium when the old Yankee Stadium was getting some renovations done. And Yankee Stadium 2, the new Yankee Stadium, they've been there since 2009. Asher, how is the new Yankee Stadium?
Yeah, well, this is the only stadium I've been able to attend. And I didn't get to go to the old Yankee Stadium, but when I went here, I've been there for an Angels game when they came to town, and definitely one of the greatest ballpark experiences I've had. I remember, I believe Mark Teixeira hit a couple home runs in that game, and we took home the win, so I couldn't complain. But I've seen pictures of the old Yankee Stadium and heard a lot of stories, and it's pretty incredible. And I definitely wish I would have gotten to attend a game, because the history there, to just be in a stadium where you can say guys like Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, all these guys played, would be pretty incredible. But yeah, new Yankee Stadium, one of my favorite stadiums for sure.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy to think that they built a new stadium again with all that history there. We've seen Fenway Park, Wrigley Field are really now the two old stadiums left, and they've got a lot of history there. I'm not a Yankee fan. I do appreciate the history. I was a little disappointed that they had the new stadium. Were you disappointed as well that they tore it down, or that they moved into a new stadium?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I know the exact specific reasons on why they changed. I get it, when you have a franchise like this, you want the best facilities, the best
Mm-hmm.
access. But to be honest, the history, like you said, in Old Yankee Stadium is so rich and so good that it does lose something moving over to the new era. And if if renovation was an option, and keeping around as much as that park as possible, yeah, I think that would have been, looking back, a great option because, in the moment it's all about progressing, going into the future of the franchise, but then you look back and you realize what that old stadium meant to so many people and meant to that fan base, and I definitely miss it as a fan.
Yeah, and when we look at the history there, like we've said, a lot of history in just this time frame that I discussed here, the past quarter century, going back to '95. And the Yankees have a lot of playoff appearances. They won the East in '96, then '98, '99, 2000, '01, '02, '03, '04, '05, '06. Then again in '09, 2011, 12, and 19. They won the wild card in 95, 97, '07, 2010, 15, 17, 18, and then in 2020. So the only non-playoff appearances that they've had in the past quarter century were in 2008, 13, 14, and 16. Although, however, this is on the heels of no playoff appearances from 82 to 94. Of course, nobody had a playoff appearance in 94, but that was a rare decade, just over a decade of unsuccessful teams for the Yankees. So on the heels of that, they've been just dominant. They've returned to dominance again. AL pennants in the past quarter century. They won in 96, 98, 99, 2000, '01, '03, and '09. They've got 40 total, and they've got 5 World Series wins in the past quarter century: 96, 98, 99, 2000, those 3 in a row. Then again in '09, 27 total, as I think everyone is familiar with because Yankees fans love chiming in, 27 rings, don't they?
Listen, I know a lot of people get frustrated when we bring up the 27 rings, but when you I believe when you do double the next team in line, I believe it's the Cardinals with 11. You gotta bring out the bragging rights occasionally. I think you know we've the thing about this franchise is it's all about a World Series. That's definitely become the mindset, and not winning a World Series in this past decade um really has felt like a failure of the team, even though, if it's all about perspective. If you were to compare it with some other teams, it'd be like, oh, just making the playoffs once in a couple years is a great success. But time and again, the Yankees have fallen short in the past few years. And yeah, we won in 2009, but with each year, the pressure to bring home another ring becomes more so. So yeah, we have won 27 times, but I think why people get so frustrated with us bringing it up is it has been 11 years at this point this season. So it's starting to get old if we can't return with a ring soon.
Yeah, although it must be nice being a Yankee fan, and as I just ran off all that long run of success, you're spoiled there, getting to the postseason almost every year. And I mean, how old are you, Asher?
I will be 18 this summer.
All right, so I mean, pretty much your entire life. How many playoff appearances have they missed out on? It's been pretty rare. So I think you're pretty spoiled there as a Yankee fan, and even older Yankee fans, they've had pretty much success all their life. So it's got to be nice to be spoiled and have that run of success, isn't
Yeah, I can't complain.
it?
It's not a difficult team to root for. As someone born in New York, I have my struggles with the Knicks and the Giants, but with the Yankees, I can't complain about our success.
Yeah, and then one last kind of bit on the history here. I mean, if you sign with the Yankees, you're kind of limited what numbers to choose from because there's a lot of retired numbers, a lot of greats. Although as I was going through this, I was a little bit surprised at some of the names. It seems like they're a little looser than some organizations, but in terms of retiring numbers. Some teams I know like will only retire Hall of Famers, and the Yankees have a lot of Hall of Famers, but there's also a couple non-Hall of Famers on here. I think every single digit number is retired. One of them's actually even retired twice. Number one retired for Billy Martin. Number two for Derek Jeter. Three for Ruth. Four for Gehrig. Five for DiMaggio. Six for Joe Torre, seven for Mickey Mantle, eight for Yogi Berra and Bill Dickey, nine for Roger Maris, 10 for Phil Rizzuto. Then, so if you want 11, 12, 13, or 14, those are open, but 15 is retired for Thurman Munson, 16 for Whitey Ford, 20 retired for Jorge Posada, 23 retired for Donnie Baseball, Don Mattingly, 32 is retired for Elson Howard, 37, Casey Stengel, 42 is retired for Mariano Rivera, as well as for Jackie Robinson throughout baseball. 44 retired for Mr. October, Reggie Jackson. 46 for Andy Pettit. 49 for Ron Guidry. And finally, 51 is retired for Bernie Williams. So, I mean, they can't retire too many more numbers or else they won't be able to field the team. They'll have to go into like the triple digits or something.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely, you could make the argument it's a bit out of hand. We definitely have retired quite a few numbers. I mean, there's certainly, the Jeters, the Ruths, the Gehrigs that have to be on that list.
Right.
I think that's why that top 10 is so elite. But unless we want to go into triple digits, we might have to pull back in the coming years.
All right, so that's a little bit about the history of the Yankees. Again, I mean, that's a few episodes if we focus too much on the history, but we will be focusing on the past 25 years in the rest of this episode of the podcast. Asher, last week on the show, talked about the Devil Rays, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the trivia question last week was who hit the first home run in Devil Rays history, of course, because when they began, they were the Devil Rays. So who hit the first home run in the history for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays? Do you want to throw a guess out there before I give the answer?
Sure. I'm just going through some of the hitters in my mind. Obviously, this is a little bit easier because they're a younger team. But this is a tough one. I don't even know that many Rays players from the beginning of the franchise. The only one that really sticks out to me that I have a lot of name recognition with would be Wade Boggs is who I'd throw out if I had to, mainly because that's only one of the hitters I know.
So actually, that is the correct answer. Wade Boggs, first home run in Rays history. Adam Sanford was he actually didn't. He knew the answer, so he didn't throw the guess out there so that we could allow our listeners to kind of venture a guess without him throwing the answer out there. He did confirm off air. So he did know that answer as well. But yeah, good job with getting this one. So now you just kind of set the bar high for yourself as I get to the Yankees question. If you get the Rays one right, you got to get the Yankees one correct. And so the Yankees, as we just mentioned, have won 5 World Series in this time frame from 95 through 2019. Who were the 5 World Series MVPs for the Yankees each year that they won? So Asher, do you have a guess for those? So they got 96, 98, 99, 2000, and then 09.
Oof, that I feel like is a harder question. I might have set the bar too high. All right, World Series MVP. So I gotta throw Jeter out there for one of them. Do I have to associate him with
for the year? Yeah. Let's try to match the years.
Okay.
And listeners, if you want to throw your guesses out there, you can do so on social media. Twitter and Instagram at Boxseat Banter on both those platforms if you want to share your guesses.
Good luck. So 99 is when Jeter had his just terrific season. So I'm gonna say Jeter from 99.
Okay.
Let's see. Then it was 2000, 96 you said,
Yeah.
and then 09
Yeah.
and 03.
And no,
Oh,
98.
not 03. They lost 03.
Yeah.
Um, 2009. This is, I believe, Alex Rodriguez was on this team, but I doubt. You have Robinson Cano. You have. Oh man, I don't even have a guess for two. You would think I'd have a guess for 2009, as that's the most recent. 96. That one. Let's just throw out another great player from that era. I'll throw out Bernie Williams for 96.
Okay.
And then actually, it might have been 98. I think Bernie Williams might be a better guess than 96. Yeah, I'm not sure about 2000. I have no guess for 2000, but I have a feeling I did not get a single one of those right. World Series MVP is not my strong suit.
It's tough because I mean the world's it's basically you get hot for 4, 5, 6, just a handful of games, and it's not necessarily the best player or representative of that. So it is tough. And also when you're winning, running off, 5 of them in a stretch, it's also hard to get them straight. And I think if you win one in 20 years, you kind of remember that one, and you're like, oh yeah, that was so and so got the MVP that year. So it is tough. I'll give you that. Jeter did win a World Series MVP. I will reveal the answer on the next episode of the show. I won't confirm or deny whether you got the correct year for Jeter, or if Bernie Williams also got one. So tune in on the next episode to find the answers. And again, chime in on social media, listeners, if you want to throw a guess out there. When it comes to the owners, I think the Yankees owner, I think, is the most well known of any owner throughout baseball, and one of the most notorious owners throughout sport. George Steinbrenner owned the team from 73 until his death in 2010. He was so well known, he was even parodied on Seinfeld. And when he passed, his sons Hal and Hank Steinbrenner took over the teams, and so that was since 2010. Hank died just last year in 2020. So Hal is the current owner of the Yankees. Now, Asher, what do you think of the ownership of the Steinbrenner family?
Well, like you said, George Steinbrenner, by far the most notorious, and he had his pros and cons. I'm not going to sit here and say that he was the greatest man. I think but I think he got the job done in a lot of ways, and he was very tough in what he demanded, and he made the expectations clear for the Yankees. It was World Series or you're fired. And if that was a good thing for the team, if it wasn't, you can make the debate. They did have continued success. They did bring home a lot of rings in his era. So since then, it's definitely, although the Steinbrenner name has continued to own the Yankees, it's definitely not the same as when George Steinbrenner was in charge. As of recently, I think Hal Steinbrenner has done a fairly good job working with the Yankees front office and with the players, and trying to adapt to the new era of baseball. So we'll see how it pans out. We're still obviously dishing out some big contracts like Garrett Cole. So I don't think money-wise it's been a problem with the new ownership. But how much they're involved and how much that lies on Cashman's shoulders, I think, is really more so credit to Cashman in terms of the Yankees' recent success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think some people don't realize some of the issues that George Steinbrenner had with MLB. I think he was like banned at one point, and then he was reinstated and stuff for things that he did. It's an interesting saga if you want to kind of look that up. But again, we're not going to spend too much time on that. And the other thing from a perspective, I'm a Dodger fan, and the Dodgers also spend a lot of money. So I may not have I'm kind of in the same side as you are on this as a Yankee fan, but I think it's funny when fans of teams criticize owners for throwing all kinds of money at players. It's like, isn't that what you want? Don't you want the players to get paid a bunch of money? Like, they deserve it. I go to the ball games to watch these great players play, give them all the money that they want, and it's I'd rather that they give it to the players than pocket it themselves. So I think it is funny when fans criticize teams for spending too much money on players.
Yeah, I'd say, I get both sides of the argument. As a Yankees fan, I'm not one to complain about a team with a large payroll. Um, what I will say, though, is that, there are players that I believe are slightly overpaid. And what does frustrate me is, a lot of fans will say, oh, the Yankees have just bought their World Series rings. And I get that side. I get, when we have the largest payroll and then win the World Series, you can point to that. But, time and again, I also point to the development and the farm system and other aspects of the team that go well. And if there was a salary cap in baseball, honestly, I would understand that as well. You give small market teams a better chance. And the luxury tax clearly doesn't seem to do much in terms of disincentivizing going over that threshold. But in terms of the owners pocketing the money, I agree 100%. I mean, these guys, they have a lot to spend clearly to fund teams like this on a year-to-year basis. And if that's the era of baseball we're in, where the contracts just seem to keep going up and up, and you have Bauer getting over $40 million a year, you get these pitchers starting to make their money, you get Trout making over $35 million a year, then yeah, you got to have an owner that's willing to pay. And I think it's proven where the Mets, they get a new owner who can dish out money. And so at this point, I think the small market teams, it's hard to be the Rays or the A's where you can pull that off, but I'm not complaining about the big payroll.
Yeah, and you mentioned kind of player development, and you mentioned Cashman. So in the GMs, Bob Watson was the GM for a couple years there from 96 and 97. And Brian Cashman, the GM since 98, which is it's crazy to think about. He's been there for over 20 years, especially, working for George Steinbrenner for, over a decade without getting fired. That's got to be some kind of record there, him and Torrey, I guess. But yeah, how has Cashman done? I think he gets, before I let you answer, I kind of, as an outsider, I think he gets overshadowed a bit, being the Yankee GM, because the owners have so much clout there in New York, that Steinbrenner brand name that they have, that Cashman doesn't get the credit that he probably deserves. But yeah, he's been there for so long, and they've had a bunch of success under him. So what do you think of his job there as a GM?
Yeah, like you said, he definitely gets pushed aside when, people can say, oh, look, how can he do a bad job when he has millions and millions of dollars to spend on his players? But at the same time, there's a lot of pressure to have that GM job in New York. And overall, I think the signings he's made, some of the trades, some of the things he's done have not been my favorite. But if you look at 2016, and as much as you can say it, a low point for the Yankees is just not making the playoffs. He made key trades. I believe he traded Chapman and Andrew Miller that year and got prospects like Gleyber Torres. And we've drafted guys like Aaron Judge, and those guys have come up through the system, Luis Severino. So overall, I'd say that I've been happy with what he's been able to do. And when you get a guy like Garrett Cole on the market, he's been able to dish out that money as well and get the job done. So I've been happy, and I'm happy to keep him as the general manager for the next few years.
And in terms of the field managers, I've got a little fact about each manager they've had in the past quarter century, and see if you can identify the manager from the fact. And just a spoiler alert, Billy Martin is not one of these guys, even though it seems like he had like 5 different tenures managing for the Yankees. I'm not sure what the official number was, but it seems like he was fired and rehired like every other year almost. So the first guy won the Cape Cod batting title in 1976 when he hit 434 on the Cape. He's also a Cape Cod Baseball League Hall of Famer.
Oof. And this is from the beginning of the 25-year tenure that we're looking at.
Yeah.
I would say it's tough because, the last 3 managers have lasted so long for the Yankees, but I believe at the beginning, I'm torn between that either being, I don't think that was, would that have been Buck Showalter?
It was, yeah, Buck Showalter. So, he had some great, I think, amateur years, didn't really correlate to being a great pro. But yeah, Showalter, so he was there from 92 to 95 at the helm of the Yankees. And then this is going to be, I think, a pretty easy one to answer. He took the Yankees to the postseason all 12 years he managed, and he set a record by winning 14 consecutive World Series games.
That would have to be Joe Torre. The number's retired for a reason.
Yeah, and it was, that was just too incredible a fact not to include. Because I think it started in 96. They dropped the first 2 games to the Braves, and then they won the next 4. And then I guess, they swept a couple. And then they won the first 2 games in one of them. So, yeah, 14 consecutive World Series games. That's unbelievable. Then their next manager put his life in danger to help a crash victim on the way home immediately after, literally, they won the 2009 World Series. And on his way home from the game, he put himself in danger to help a crash victim.
Really? I did not know that. That's pretty amazing. But I do know the manager. It is Joe Girardi taking over for Joe Torre. Unfortunately, just because he had the same name, he didn't have the same success.
Yeah, so he was there 08 to 2017. He had the 1 World Series there in 09. And now their current manager is a 3rd-generation big leaguer and a descendant of an American pioneer and frontiersman.
That would be Aaron Boone.
Yep, descendant of a Daniel Boone. So he's been there since 2018. So a little better naming the managers from the facts than the World Series MVPs there, Asher. What are your thoughts on these managers?
Yeah, well, I'll say it's a bit easier than the World Series MVP. Buck Showalter, I never knew a lot about him as the Yankees manager. I knew that he had a short tenure with the Yankees. You know him more for what he was as the Orioles manager, and just me watching games in the past decade, watching them go against him more so than him managing for us. But obviously you have Joe Torre, who, just one of the greatest managers of all time. Granted, he was working with a lot of talent. It was hard to mess up some of those Yankees teams, but he's definitely by far one of my favorite managers. And then Joe Girardi, who's now with the Phillies, I think he did a solid job. He had what I would say is a bit of a tougher job in some aspects, trying to get this Yankees team back to its success. And then I'd say the jury's still out on Aaron Boone. I've liked what he's done. I like the way he connects with the players, but it's all about whether or not we start to get that playoff success. And so far, it's the argument how much the manager has to do with those World Series winning teams. So we'll see what Aaron Boone can do. He's pretty young into his career, so I'm pretty excited for the future.
All right, yeah, it will be interesting to see what the future holds. But then coming right up, we will look at the past as we go over our rosters for the Yankees in the past quarter century. Asher, so now let's go over this roster for the Yankees. I've gone over the 29 previous rosters for all the other teams. This is the final one to discuss. And again, a quick reminder to all the listeners in constructing these rosters, it's over a 25-year time period from 1995 to 2019. This was The rosters were made prior to the 2020 season, so that was not included. You pick one player per year. You get that year's version of the player. You cannot repeat players, and you must form a coherent roster. It's a pretty fun little experiment, fun thing to do. And so I'll get started here with the Yankees at catcher. Got Jorge Posada, switch hitter from 2000. He was worth 5.5 wins, 28 home runs, 35 doubles. Nice power from the catcher position. He was an all-star, a silver slugger, triple slash of 287, 417, 527, 139 OPS plus. So, I mean, a ton of offensive production from a catcher. At first base, lefty Jason Giambi in 2002, worth 7.1 wins, 41 bombs, drove in over 120, 314, 435, 598 triple slash. He was an all-star and a silver slugger. He OPS'd over 1,000. At second base, Robinson Cano from 2010, he was worth 8.1 wins, 41 doubles, 29 bombs, drove in over 100. Smooth swinging lefty there. Solid defense. He was an all-star, gold glover, and a silver slugger. At third base, A-Rod in 07 led the league with 9.4 WAR. He was an MVP, all-star, and a silver slugger. Several offensive categories he led the league in: runs with 143, home run and RBI with 54 and 156 respectively. Slugging 645, OPS at 1,067, OPS plus at 176, and total bases with 376. So just video game numbers there from A-Rod. And then at shortstop, obviously, Derek Jeter in 1999, worth 8 wins, led the league in hits with 219. He was an all-star that year. Triple slash of 349, 438, 552. So again, that's a kind of defensive position, but tremendous offensive production there from Jeter. Asher, what are your thoughts on this infield here?
It's a pretty amazing infield. I mean, you can't really complain. I think, Jorge Posada at catcher, one of the core four, one of just the most elite players. And then obviously you got Derek Jeter, who's just one of my favorite players. I think as most typical Yankees fans, he's who I wanted to be growing up.
How much competition was there to get number 2 in Little League there in New York?
Nearly impossible. Nearly impossible. And to play shortstop as well was always the goal. But, you had Alex Rodriguez and Robinson Cano. I think Alex Rodriguez in 2007 absolutely, like you said, just went off on a tear. Just those numbers are ridiculous. And Cano, after signing with the Mariners, I became a bit less of a fan, but he had some great moments for the Yankees. I got to see him play. And I think Jason Giambi, while, stint with the Yankees, not the longest, but 2002, just another unreal year. So this infield is just really all around elite. You really can't complain. Hopefully, we get some numbers from Gary Sanchez like Jorge Posada, but that's not looking likely. But yeah, definitely one of the best catchers.
Yeah, then in the outfield, I've got Hideki Matsui from 04. He's worth 5 wins, 31 home runs, 34 doubles, 108 RBI. He got on base at almost a 400 clip, triple slash of 298, 390, 522. He was an all-star. Bernie Williams, the switch hitter and center, got him in 1998. He was worth 5.3 wins. He was an all-star and a gold glover, led the league, hitting 339 that year, got on base at a 422 clip. So again, you got great offensive production from, up the middle. Then in right field, Aaron Judge, his rookie of the year in 2017, he was worth 7.9 wins, led the league with 128 runs, also led the league 52 home runs. Incredible for a rookie to lead the league, 52 bombs, which set the rookie home run record, which was actually just broken a couple years ago by another New Yorker, Peter Alonso. Judge, all that power came at a price. He did lead the league with 208 punch outs, but he also led the league 127 walks, which helped him to a 422 on base percentage. Along with the rookie of the year, he's also an all-star and a silver slugger. And then at DH, I've got Alfonso Soriano in 03, led the league with 682 at bats, 38 home runs, 35 stolen bases, 293, 38, 525, triple slash. He was an all-star. I kind of cheated a bit, put him at DH. I don't know how much he DH that year, actually. But what are your thoughts on these outfielders and the DH, the rest of the starting lineup I've got here?
Yeah, I'd say, when I was going over the rosters, Bernie Williams was one of those guys who, as I just looked at his numbers down the line, it was just year after year of just success that I feel like goes unmentioned a lot. Just the dominance he had. So fitting him in that 1998 season is a great choice. He had a great season and playing him at center field there. Aaron Judge, like you said, 2017, hopefully a repeatable year. It's hard to say with the injury trouble, but that season was just amazing to watch. And like you said, the 208 strikeouts, the 52 home runs, the 127 walks, or basically the defense was incredibly bored. I mean, he wasn't putting the ball in play a lot, but the home run strikeouts is something I talk about a lot, how the era of baseball we're in is just increased home runs, increased strikeouts. And I'd love to know your thoughts on what do you think about that era, because it used to be a lot of getting guys on base, stealing bases, moving them over, and now that we have just strikeouts, home runs, is that more exciting to see the long ball, or is it a little less exciting when these hitters have this mentality of just trying to hit it over the fence all the time?
I think a little bit of it is kind of circumstantial. Like there's still those big home runs that, are very memorable and very exciting. But yeah, I think that when you have something happening so frequently, it kind of loses its, appeal and its excitement generally. The same thing goes for the strikeout. If it's second and third, one out, and you get that punch out and then you get another out, to get out of the inning, that's exciting. Yeah. But when it's happening over and over, like, nobody on and you're just getting the strikeouts, it's kind of more ho hum. And again, it loses its meaning. It's, I don't need to see a pop up that's, a routine play. That's obviously not exciting either. But the more balls in play, the more chances are for things to happen, whether it's a great defensive play, whether it's an extra base hit. And I like that stuff much more. I get it that you have to, if you played the game trying to just put the ball in play and pitching in contact, you're probably going to get beat these days because guys do have so much power and guys pitch, they have so much more movement. And I think with the information that we have, they're able to utilize that better and to maximize their velocity and their pitches and their pitch mix and how they tunnel everything. So if you didn't play that game and didn't, try to do that, you would be getting beat. So I understand it from the perspective of building a team and how you're trying to play. But as a fan, I don't like it as much for the most part, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I'm with you there. And I think the other issue is that the sabermetrics a lot of times reflect the fact that this home run ball type hitter is the best run value you get, even with the high strikeout numbers. So the game just continues to go. I mean, home run records continue to be broken, as do strikeout records. And, it corresponds, I think, with some dip in viewership in the MLB. So it's, what can you do from an MLB standpoint? You can't tell these guys to not compete their best from a pitching standpoint or to change the style of pitching or hitting. So it's a difficult question. I got to say, though, when you have somebody hit the 52 home runs like Aaron Judge, it did make for an exciting season. So there is the pros and cons. But, yeah, this outfield, I'm right here with you, very elite.
Yeah, then as we get into the bench, I've got Didi Gregorius from 2018. He was worth 4.8 wins, 27 bombs into the short porch there in right field for the Yankees. DJ LeMahieu from 2019, he was worth 5.9 wins, 26 bombs, drove in 102, 327, 375, 518 triple slash. He was an all-star and a silver slugger. Nick Swisher, switch hitter, got him as a fourth outfielder in 2012. He was worth 4 wins. He had 24 home runs, drove in 93. Then the backup catcher, Gary Sanchez, in 2016, he hit 299, 376, 657 that year. Limited time. He only had 229 plate appearances, hit 20 bombs in that time. So, I mean, if you extrapolate that over a whole season, that's a tremendous, tremendous potential. And yeah, Sanchez, it seems like he has been a little inconsistent there for the Yankees. But yeah, so that's the bench. What do you got on these guys, Asher?
Yeah, I think, like you said, if you extrapolate it over a whole season, and the issue is we've been trying to extrapolate that over his career, and that just has not been the case. I mean, that 2016 really made a statement, but this is the perfect world, is having him backup catcher for Jorge Posada if he's playing the way he is. But yeah, that 2016 season was great. And DJ LeMahieu, he's been one of my favorite players over the past few years to watch as a Yankees fan. No one really thought this was coming when he joined the Yankees. I remember when we signed him, he came over just to really fill in and add some depth to this infield. And then the nature of the Yankees to get injured really gave him some playing time, and he just ran with it. And I think this speaks to that level of baseball we were talking about before, where he'll hit 20 home runs. He's not blowing the ball out of the ballpark, but he's getting a lot of base hits, and he's starting a lot of rallies, and he's scoring a lot of runs and hitting in crucial situations. I think his average with runners in scoring position has been some of the best in the league. So I love DJ LeMahieu here on your bench, and I think Nick Swisher is also a great pick. He's been one of my favorite players. It looks like he's always just having a blast out there. So he's a solid player to have as well.
Yeah, and great point with LeMahieu's actually kind of like the antithesis of Judge, where he kind of slaps it all over the field, an old school player there. And then as we get into the pitching staff, we'll start with Andy Pettitte, the lefty from 97. He was worth 8.4 wins. He went 18-7, ERA 2.88, and he was a workhorse, led the league with 35 starts, 240 and a third innings, ERA plus of 156. He kept the ball in the yard, led the league in home runs per 9 at 0.3. Mike Mussina from 01, he was worth 7.1 wins. He went 17-11, 3.15 ERA, almost 230 innings for him. He had 3 shutouts that year, over 200 strikeouts, led the league in FIP at 292. CC Sabathia from 09, went 19-8, led the league with those 19 wins, 337 ERA, and 230 innings. So another workhorse there, giving you a lot of innings. Chin-Ming Wang from 06, he also led the league with 19 wins, 19-6, 218 innings, ERA plus of 125. He also kept the ball in the yard, led the league with 0.5 home runs per 9. Then rounding out the rotation, Hiroki Kuroda from 2013. Not a great win-loss record, but he had a solid ERA, 335. His FIP was about 3.5 in 201 and a third innings. So I know, some familiar names, and I think a couple maybe surprising names, and who I got at least in this rotation. Asher, what do you think on these guys?
Yeah, I think this was where I was surprised going through the roster, is that it was a little weaker than I expected it to be, and maybe not from a statistical standpoint, but just from, just a name recognition standpoint. You look at this offense and it's just filled with just elite players. And yeah, you get Andy Pettitte, CC Sabathia in here, but this starting rotation, I think, is a bit, if you were to say, get a starting rotation from the past 25 years, but you've got to pick over offensive players, it's really tough to do, because this offensive lineup almost continuously wins out when picking starters. I think that's the big issue, is this team has always been offense first. And so overall, it's a solid starting pitching rotation. If you get all five of these guys going the same year, you're going to have a pretty lights out year. But like you said, the name recognition isn't there as much. The numbers certainly are, though. You still have some great seasons, multiple guys with a sub 3 ERA, and then everyone else sub 4. So overall, it's a solid season if you get all five of these guys going.
And then we'll start off with some big time name recognition in the bullpen. Mariano Rivera in 96, which was before he became the closer, actually. He was worth 5 wins out of the bullpen, which is pretty crazy. 8-3 was his record, 2.09 ERA, 61 appearances, 107 and 2/3 innings. So, that's a throwback right there. Well, he gives you multiple innings pretty much every time out, just 5 saves, but 130 strikeouts. His ERA plus, which for a reliever, it is not the best means because they have the limited innings. But when you go 107 innings, it's got some more value there. ERA plus of 240, 10.9 Ks per nine. So yeah, before he was the closer, but he was just dominant that year, and I love him being able to go multiple innings every time out. Jabba Chamberlain in 08, worth 3.5 wins. He was 4-3 with a 2.6 ERA out of the pen. He was also a guy giving you multiple innings, 42 games. He also started 12, so he could start a game if you need him. He had 100 innings that year, ERA plus of 170. David Robertson in 2011, he went 4-0 out of the pen with a 1.08 ERA, 100 strikeouts in 66 and 2/3 innings, good for 13.5 Ks per nine. He was an all-star. Dylan Betances from 2014, he was 5-0 out of the pen, 1.4 ERA, 90 innings and 70 appearances, 135 strikeouts, which was also 13.5 Ks per nine. Andrew Miller, the lefty, in 2015, 3-2, 2.04 ERA, 61 and 2/3 innings. He had 36 saves for the Yankees that year. He also struck out 100 dudes in 61 and 2/3 innings. That was 14.6 strikeouts per nine. John Wetland from 95, he was only 1-5. Got a lot of tough losses there out of the pen, but he had 31 saves, 2.93 ERA, struck out just over a batter an inning. Then Tom Gordon from 2005, he was worth 3 wins, 5-4. His ERA was around 2.5, gave you 80 innings, struck out. He was he had a pedestrian 7.7 Ks per nine, whereas the rest of the pen was striking out a ton of dudes, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in the pen struck out over at least 100 batters. So pretty impressive punch out numbers there from the pen.
Yeah, this bullpen is absolutely really elite. I think if you look past in the past few years, the bullpen has really been what this team has leaned on from a pitching standpoint. Like I kind of said with the starting rotation, it hasn't always been there. But when you got guys like Mariano Rivera, who is one of my favorite players, if not my favorite player, and you get innings from him in 96, and then you get Dylan Betances and Andrew Miller in more recent years. They were absolutely elite. They had some good years as Yankees. This bullpen overall is going to get you a lot of innings. I think some of my favorite picks would be Job Chamberlain here, because he had this standout season. He gets you a lot of innings. I believe he got a few starts this season as well. Overall, this bullpen is very similar to mine as I was going through the roster. I think it's racking up strikeouts, it's racking up wins, and who you have closing games might be an issue to settle among the players. I mean, so much talent here. I think this is what this starting rotation, where it lacks, is really made up in this bullpen.
Yeah, and I think, earlier when we talked about Torrey and all the success that he had, I think that, a good bullpen can make a manager's decisions look very good and make a manager look very smart. And you also mentioned that, yeah, it was nice for him to have such a great roster to work with, and especially that kind of safety blanket of Mariano Rivera at the back of games. It's nice to have that and know that if you can get there, he's going to slam the door. And I'm sure that helped a lot, made it a lot easier for Torrey to win those 14 World Series games in a row. But yeah, I agree with you. This bullpen is pretty lights out and can pick up the starting pitching when they need to.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the Yankees have always really leaned on their bullpen, and I think especially in this era of baseball as of late, we get a lot of teams like the Rays who really rely on bullpens entirely. I think it's interesting the debate between what becomes more valuable, starting pitching or bullpen arms, especially as starters I feel like tend to go a little less innings recently. We don't have like the 250 innings that we used to see.
Right.
Um, but at the same time, this might be the year of no hitters, so the starters might be coming back. But yeah, this bullpen is just, especially with Mariano closing it down, is just so good.
Yep. So that's the roster for the Yankees that I've assembled here for the past quarter century. So Asher, that was my roster, but I understand you put together a Yankees roster as well. So why don't you take us through your roster and maybe kind of point out some of the differences between our rosters?
Yeah, a lot of similarities for sure, but I have some guys moved around some different years. In the infield, I've got Jeter from '99 like you, but I was able to get Mark Teixeira in there from 2009. And this year I just think Teixeira had a great year. He's one of those players that it's tough because with so much elite talent, you weren't able to get him on the list, and I was just able to fit him in here. This was one of the ones I was debating. And then Alex Rodriguez, you had him in 2007, which was definitely his best season as a Yankee. He's somebody I wanted at 2007. But I kept him at 2005 because I realized that season he played really well, very close, very similar numbers to his 2007. I'd say just a little under. But because of that, I was able to put Jorge Posada in 2007, where he had a great season. So I moved Alex Rodriguez down, still got good numbers from him, and had, I think, a slightly better season from Jorge Posada. And then in the infield, in the backup infield, I also had Jason Giambi. And well, I put him at DH. I don't know if he DH'd a lot, but and then at backup catcher, I had Gary Sanchez as well. In the outfield, I went with Bernie Williams from '98. This was maybe one of the tougher choices I made just because I was looking at all the different successful seasons Bernie Williams had, and I was really trying to figure out where I could fit him in, and it actually made it tougher. It wasn't like I was picking just one standout year, but I ended up going 98 because his numbers are just out of this world. And then I also had Nick Swisher and Robinson Cano, but I believe you had Swisher in 2012 and Cano in 2010. I actually flipped that, so I had Robinson Cano in 2012 and Swisher in 2010. And I think for me, I think that made a little more sense from a statistical standpoint. But if we go to the starting rotation, like you, I also had Andy Pettit and Mussina. And then I was able to get Masahiro Tanaka in at 2014. I wasn't able to get CC Sabathia though, and that was one that was maybe the tougher decision I had to make because CC is just such an elite player. So I was debating that, but I ended up going with Tanaka at 2014. And then in the pen, I think my biggest difference would be Mariano Rivera. I think I had to keep him as a closer. You got the innings from him as a relief pitcher, but I just couldn't do that to him. I needed him as the Yankees closer, so I had to wait till after 98 where he actually took that closer job. So I took Mariano Rivera in 2003. And then very similar, except I believe in 2018 I took Chapman just to round off that pen. He was somebody I was debating, I think probably, if not the toughest choice, was actually 2002 with Jason Giambi, because I was debating him or Alfonso Soriano. Soriano just had an insane year, 2002, but Jason Giambi just edged him out, so I wasn't able to get Soriano on my list, unfortunately. But that's mainly the main differences of our two lists. Besides that, they're very similar.
Yeah, and anytime you put these together, it's fitting all the pieces of the puzzle. And if you get one guy 1 year, that kind of changes all the other pieces that you're able to get. And yeah, so you got Tanaka. Were there any other names? A lot of similar names between your team and my roster. Were there any other names who were considered, who you were kind of bummed, who you were unable to fit onto your roster?
Yeah, I think the big one was Gary Sheffield, Hideki Matsui. I went with Gary Sheffield in 2004, but he was neck and neck with Hideki Matsui in 2004, and I ended up going with Gary Sheffield, but I was debating that for a while, and then, like I said, Alfonso Soriano, I really wanted to get him on the list, and I just couldn't fit him in.
Yeah, on some of these rosters that have done, some of the years are kind of struggling to find a player that's good enough, whereas this Yankee team is kind of the opposite problem. You've got so many good players who you're considering, so it's unfortunate that I've got so many good players who were unable to be on the roster. Some other ones that played such integral parts on their title teams. Paul O'Neill was a guy I could not fit on the roster. Tino Martinez, you mentioned Teixeira, then Giancarlo Stanton, who they've had for the past few years. Seems like when he's on the field, he's great. It's just has he seen the field enough? From the pitching side of things, David Cone, David Wells, a couple guys who've thrown perfect games there for the Yankees, and some big time pitchers. Roger Clemens, then Tanaka, who you got. Looking at Clemens and Wells and Cone, like I didn't see a great single season. I think it was Clemens had some great postseason appearances and had some. I don't know if had some great success. I don't know if he's won a Cy Young there with the Yankees, but looking at his numbers, they weren't as impressive. And then Bernie Williams, I wasn't sure if I got his best year. Same thing with Tom Gordon. Gordon and Cano, they maybe had better years. Because you said you got Cano in 2012, right?
Yeah, I went Cano in 2012 and just switched him with Swisher. But like you said, it was so difficult to pick. And all these starting pitchers, when it was like, oh, this would be a good year to take this starting pitcher. And then I looked at the offense and I was like, oh, but I have to take this player. I mean, he just put up insane numbers. So that was by far the most difficulty I had. I mean, even getting Mariano Rivera in there after not taking him the year you did, I was like, well, when do I even fit him in when I have all this offense? But I got a solid year from him, not even his best year. But just so many players that really I couldn't get in where I expected, there'd be no doubt that I would.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun kind of putting these rosters together. Listeners, if you are motivated to put your own roster together, you can visit the website boxseatbanner.com. There's a link to download a template off of Google spreadsheets, and you can make your own roster. You can just use your own program, whatever you want to do. If you do make one, I would love to see it. So make sure to share that with me. Again, you can reach me on social media at Boxseat Banter, both Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, Asher, it's a lot of fun putting these rosters together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult. I thought it would be a task. I'd just go through the years and just pick out the best player, and then, you got to move them around. You got to actually make a coherent roster where you fit out the infield, the outfield. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great activity, and I learned actually a lot about some of these players that I wasn't expecting to.
All right. So yeah, a lot of fun. I encourage you guys, listeners, to make your own rosters if you're so inclined and if you have some time to kill, want to put one of these together. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, but like we just mentioned, there's a lot of names that we're not able to include, and if you put your own roster together, you can include them. Some of the Yankee fans from the '90s are probably upset that there's no Paul O'Neill and no Tino Martinez. They're probably yelling at their speakers as they're listening to this. So yeah, go ahead and make your own and make one better than mine, and you can also criticize mine as well. If you want to let me have it, go ahead and do so. Point out the faults on my roster again, on Twitter or Instagram. We've got the Q&A section now. So Asher, we'll get your opinion as a Yankee fan to get your perspective on a couple of topics here. First question comes from a listener, Dave Barrow. And again, listeners, we open it up for questions on social media, so make sure to follow there. But he asked, what are your thoughts as a Yankee fan on A-Rod and Clemens, two guys who, they're tainted with the steroid scandal. They're great talents. If they didn't have the steroid allegations over them, there's like surefire first ballot inner circle Hall of Famers. But yeah, what are your thoughts? I think, you're a little younger, so I don't know. How much did you see Clemens play for the Yankees?
Yeah, Clemens not nearly as much as Alex Rodriguez, but A-Rod is one of those players where he's quite controversial. I think he's moved past it and it has been kind of reaccepted by the baseball world in a lot of ways, but you know, a lot of my friends will hold players like A-Rod and Clemens over me as black spots in Yankees history. And I think it's unfortunate because it's definitely undeniable that they had the natural talent without the steroids, and they chose to go down that path, and you can't make an argument that I can't say the numbers would not have been different. I mean, it's very easy to say, listen, they wouldn't have done what they did and it could have impacted the team. We were talking about that 2007 and 2005 year that Alex Rodriguez had for the Yankees where he hit 50 home runs and just went on a tear, and it makes you wonder how much it was impacted. And frankly, in the Hall of Fame debate, I stand by the fact that players who use steroids should not be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I know a lot of people say let guys like Bonds and those guys in, but I'm of the personal belief that yes, he was a Yankee, he provided some great moments, but you gotta keep the punishment because it's a scandal. It hurts the name of baseball, and it hurt the Yankees organization at the time as well.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of piggyback on that in terms of not allowing guys, not voting guys, steroid users into the Hall of Fame, how do you kind of police that? Because some guys, we know some guys are kind of guilty by association. Some are, suspected of it. Do you have an answer for that in terms of how do you monitor that?
Yeah, it's a tricky subject. I think the guys that were definitely found guilty of using steroids should just be just not on in the Hall of Fame. Period. I think you draw the line there, and then guys who were suspected. That's really a tricky one because at that point it's just who do you trust, and I think where I would draw the line is were they found guilty of using steroids? Yes, then they're not in the Hall of Fame. If not, if they were, if they didn't do steroids themselves, but maybe knew about it, then I would say let those guys into the Hall of Fame if they put up the numbers they did. It's tricky, but for me, the line is really did they use steroids? Did they not? And it comes down to that because there's a lot of gray area in that topic where you can debate it, but overall it's just impact on the game, and I think it comes down to if they use steroids. Is
Mhm.
that your belief? Is it the Hall of Fame no for Barry Bonds, for A-Rod, for those guys?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I'm similar to you in terms of, yeah, I don't think guys who cheated the game like that should be in the Hall of Fame. I do think it's tough to monitor that and decide. And I don't think it's fair to the voters to have to try to determine, oh, this guy did or this guy didn't. And, they have to make that distinction. So it is very tough. I think if I had a ballot right now, I would not cast it for guys who, you know, were known to have steroids, to use steroids, but it's tough because, yeah, I mean, they're chances are there's guys in recent years who were inducted into Hall of Fame who have used steroids, but they are not as, they were not proven, they were not revealed like the Bonds and Clemens and A-Rod and some of these guys. So they were able to get in. So it is tough. I don't think there's an easy solution. I think there is a solution there. And I know the Hall of Fame has kind of made their efforts to prevent the guys from getting in by shortening the length on the ballot from 15 years to 10 years. So now these guys are going to start falling off the ballot. With newer, younger voters, though, I think that some of the guys coming on in the future are going to have a better shot, since the older guys are not voting anymore, and they're the ones who were not voting for your Bonds and Clemens and those guys. So by the time A-Rod gets on the ballot, if those guys are not voting anymore, and we've got a number of new voters who, they may be putting the check mark next to A-Rod and think he's got a better shot of getting in than Bonds or Clemens. So it'll be interesting to see in a few years when he is on the ballot.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it shouldn't be the burden of the voters to make that decision. I think there should be some sort of distinct rule about, or some sort of penalty that's laid out by the Hall of Fame Association in terms of just whether or not these guys even appear on the ballot if they're found guilty of using steroids. So I'm with you there. It's tough because these guys were great athletes and they put up great numbers and they sold a lot of tickets, and they still had a lot of positive contributions to the game, even if their image and looking back it was tainted and it wasn't as positive as it was in the moment. But I think overall, like you said, there needs to be some sort of distinct rule, because it can't be, oh, you let this guy in but you don't let this guy in, especially as, like you said, the new voters come in and who's voting changes and who's on the ballot changes.
Mm-hmm. And this other one I wanted to get your perspective on. I think you have a similar perspective as mine, since our favorite teams were affected in very similar ways. What's your perspective on this whole Astros cheating scandal?
Yeah, this one has frustrated me for a very long time. I think the MLB did a pretty horrible job of handling this cheating scandal. My personal opinion is uh, the World Series should be taken away and these players should face some sort of punishment. We haven't seen that. We saw some front office people get fired, some managers get fired, but overall, no suspensions were dealt. And if we look at, it relates directly to the steroid era of baseball, where these guys were suspended, and people can make the argument that stealing pitchers creates an even bigger advantage than using steroids. So I was frustrated that there was no suspensions. I hope that with fans back in the stadium, the Astros get to hear a bit about it. But overall, you look back at the Yankees, we've played the Astros, and I remember when we played them in that 2017 postseason, and it felt like there was not a single chance we had. When we went into their stadium, we couldn't hit, and we were getting shut out inning after inning, and it was frustrating. And at that point, you just had to tip the cap and say these guys are just better than us, and they're playing better. And obviously, they stole a World Series from the Dodgers, not the same thing, but it was just, you were kind of just shocked at how good they were performing and how little a offense like the Yankees, who had just been elite all season, couldn't do anything. And then you look back and you hear about what was going on and how our offense had just no chance of matching their offense because their offense had such an upper hand. And so I've always been an advocate that there should have been more punishment, and that frankly Rob Manfred did not handle it the best.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. We got robbed of a great, Dodger Yankee World Series. We haven't had one since 1981, and we've had there's been so many of those matchups, in the 40s and 50s, and then 1977, 78, and 81. That that three in that kind of 5-year stretch there. So, but in our lifetime, we haven't had that Dodger Yankee World Series. So it's a bummer that we got robbed of it that year in 2017.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you don't know what would have happened. Both teams can say that, they got robbed at a chance at a World Series, and others who play the Astros in the playoffs as well. And then, it continued on through 18 and 19, although the MLB, concluded they did not steal signs those following years. I think that was pretty ridiculous in itself to say that this team won a World Series and then just decided on its own to stop cheating. Made no sense to me. So overall, the whole situation, I think, was pretty disastrous for the MLB. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So those are the questions, the topics that we had this week for the Yankees. So thanks for answering those, Asher.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the guys who have missed the roster. We talked about the guys who made the roster in both of our rosters. But Asher, as we grade the roster right here, just focusing on my roster, how would you grade this roster? And this is kind of comparing it to the other rosters, following, the same criteria, how well it might compete against a similarly constructed rosters. What are the strengths and weaknesses, and what letter grade would you assign this Yankee roster that I have created?
Yeah, I think with such a historic team, you get so many great players. So I think personally, this roster, and the one you've created should stack up with any other team that you can create. I think it has to be one of the best historical rosters you can make, just with the offense. So I'd say the strength of this roster certainly lies in the offense, and then solid in the pen. And then from starting rotation is probably the weakest area. But if I had to give this a letter grade, I'd say I don't think I can go lower than maybe it's an A- for the starting rotation is where I think is where it gets brought down from just a solid A. You could argue B+ with a weakness, but I think the pen picks it up. So I'd give it an A-.
Okay, very, very fair grading from you. I think, a lot of a lot of the people who I've had on the show, who are fans of the teams, they're looking at the roster a little bit through rose-colored glasses and kind of overgrade a little bit. I've been a kind of strict grader, although I also have access to all my rosters and all the stats to really compare. So I tend to be a little harder usually. Yeah, I agree with you in pretty much everything you said there. Offensively, they're very impressive. In comparing them to all the other rosters I have, this offense is pretty much above average across the board. They actually have the most home runs and the most runs. They do have a lot of strikeouts, but they also have a lot of plate appearances. So that's where that comes into play a little bit. In terms of the position player weakness, I think the defense is the one weak spot there. They're not great defenders for the most part, but the way they hit kind of doesn't matter. As you mentioned, the starting pitching is the biggest weak link on the team, but it's not a huge weak link. Their starting pitching is closer to average when comparing them to the rest of the rosters. Um, and I will say that the guys who missed the cut, who I mentioned a couple segments ago, I don't think they really would have improved the starting rotation too much. But yeah, the pen is dominant, and I think they would pick up the slack from the starting rotation. And again, it's their average, the starting rotation, which is not necessarily a bad thing. This is the best bullpen out of all the rosters, and with the offense and the pen, I think that makes up for the starters being just average, and they're not as important. They're not going to be giving you as many innings. So yeah, I give them an A overall, which is I think a rare time where I actually have a higher grade than my guest.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to be as objective as possible. Any team with Jeter on it, I want to give an A plus. But I think when you're comparing it to just every team's best players, it's going to be tough to win a lot of games, no matter how good this team is. Like you said, I think just offensively, you can't argue the prowess this team holds. But it's almost the offensive ability that limited me picking, the better starting pitchers in times I could. So that's where I come down on the team a bit. And like you said, defensively, but overall, I agree with you here, A minus. And is this one of the better teams in terms of like the highest grading, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I only gave out, I don't have the list in front of me and how many grades. I think I tried to kind of keep it where there were just a few A's and a few F's, slightly more B's and D's and then more C's. I tried to keep it with that traditional bell curve. I don't know how well I can go back and look at the 30 and see where I graded them all. But yeah, there were just a few A's. I think I want to say this team, the Red Sox, maybe the Dodgers, the Mariners, kind of surprisingly. But when you look at the roster, they had some very, very good players. It kind of worked out well where they had, in the 90s, they had some phenomenal players, some inner circle Hall of Famers. And after that, it seemed it worked out well where they had a player having a great career year like every other year, and it was a different guy each year, so it worked out well for constructing this roster. So yeah, not a lot of A's. I think this is definitely one of the better ones, which makes sense since the Yankees do have 5 World Series wins and they've been in the playoffs almost every year in this time frame.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think, when you mention the Mariners at first, it's like, really? And then you think about it, and they've always had a couple of really good players on that team, and they've never been a team that's been just like an Orioles level team over the past couple of years. So that makes sense to me, and I'd be curious to know the Fs. But yeah, I think overall, I'm right here with you, and it's a great roster.
All right, yeah. So we're in agreement there, and yeah, those are our grades for this Yankee roster. Asher, it's been a lot of fun talking about the Yankees with you. Appreciated your insight and analysis, discussing these guys from your perspective as a Yankee fan. So as we finish up, I'll throw it to you. What are your final thoughts that you want to share on the New York Yankees?
Yeah, I think, I've been a Yankee fan my whole life, and overall, personally, first of all, building the roster is a ton of fun, and you learn a lot about the players and making those decisions, and you gain an appreciation for the depth of the team as it goes back over the years. I think, in terms of the Yankees right now, as we focus on the 2021 season, how it's opened up, you know, I follow them very closely, and I believe it reflects this roster that we built very similarly. We don't have the strongest starting pitching, but we have a solid bullpen that we rely on, and then our offense is one to be reckoned with. So my personal hopes is a World Series coming up soon, hopefully 2021, but we'll see where we lie.
Yeah, when in discussing the Yankees, they are such a historical franchise, and they're a barometer for everyone else. They from the perspective of the other 29 fan bases, they truly are the evil empire, the team that everyone loves to hate. But like one of their great players, Reggie Jackson, said, they don't boo nobodies. So the reason that they have so much hate is because they are so good, and they, everyone wants to beat them because they are that, premier team. If you look through their history, Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, Maris, they have like so many great names. And then, recently with Jeter, with Mariano. So, the pinstripes are such an iconic look. They truly are the greatest franchise in North American sports. And it, I'm not exactly happy to say that as not a Yankee fan, but I do really appreciate the history of the franchise. How can you not like Mickey Mantle, right? Like, it's such a great, exciting, dynamic player. Jolton Joe, like I'm a big history fan, in terms of sport, and I really appreciate all of that. So yeah, they are the greatest franchise in North American sports. They can brag about their 27 rings all day, and that's what they are. So it must be nice being a Yankee fan and having all of that in your back pocket, and having that to root for. So again, Asher, I want to thank you for joining me here, and listeners, make sure to check out, the Steel podcast. Asher, if you want to share any more information about that, go ahead. You have any other information on that for our listeners?
Yeah. First of all, thank you again. It's been a blast talking about the Yankees. And I really like the podcast here. And yeah, the Steel podcast, we've been doing it for a couple years now, and we've been coming out with episodes on YouTube and on different streaming platforms, and we like to talk about just all different MLB news. We like to cover as many teams as we can, and give our personal perspectives, and we talk a lot about sabermetrics, and yeah, so we'd love to have you guys listen and keep listening to this podcast. It was great, and thank you again.
All right, this is Billy Ballas of Box Seat Banter, signing off.